Welcome back, guys. So today we're going to continue looking at imperialism in Africa. And this time we're going to look at three things in particular. We're going to go more in depth into social Darwinism. We're going to go over the Berlin Conference. And then we're going to look at some positive and negative effects of imperialism in Africa. All right. So to begin, we are going to start with social Darwinism. And again, I'm going to do mine in different colors so that you can, or so that it organizes my thoughts. You do not have to, but you can. So, social Darwinism first. All right, social Darwinism. We talked a little bit about it in a previous video, but now just to explain how it coincides with imperialism in Africa. So you got these European countries, right? You got the European countries like France, Spain, and Great Britain. All right, and there's more than just those three, but those are the three big ones. And what they essentially believe is that they need more colonies. They believe that they need more colonies because that would increase the size of their empire, how much they have control over, okay? And so because they need more colonies, it goes to the idea that empires equate to greatness. So the larger your empire, the greater you are. And that is why they believe that they need more. They need more. So they got to conquer these areas. They have to get more colonies. And so they start to have this thought and this idea that so while they're saying this, that they need more colonies and that so that they can increase their empires, so that they can maintain their greatness, what's really playing out and what they believe, what they're thinking, they're just not saying it out loud, is that Europe is more important than Africa. That Europe is higher up on the scale than Africa is. And so the combination of needing more colonies, the empire system, and the belief that Europe is higher up on the scale than Africa combines with the teachings of Charles Darwin, who was a scientist and a teacher. And Charles Darwin always taught survival of the fittest. All right, and that the survival of the fittest, the strongest would continue to live on. It went along with his theory of evolution. And so what Europe takes that, combining it with this over here, Europe takes that to mean two things. One, that as a continent, Europe was deserving of all the money and strength. All right? They also believe that because Africa, which again has a much different culture and a different way of life than the Europeans, but because they were not as modernized as the Europeans, going along with Darwin's theory, because they had not evolved to a more modern system and a more modern culture, they did not deserve these things. So the money that they had, they didn't deserve. They didn't deserve greatness because they had not evolved in the manner in which Europe has. Because remember, We're talking about a time period of the Industrial Revolution where Europe is getting things and making things, and they're creating things, and technology is improving in Europe. And it's not doing so in Africa. And so they put this theory into play. But some things do change, and it goes back to this idea of technology that allowed them to do so. And that is, number one, you get railroads and trains. And I'm going to draw a very poorly drawn train because I'm not a good drawer. All right, railroads. The invention of the Maxim gun, which was a machine gun. That allowed you to shoot just so many bullets. So railroads, the Maxim gun, and improvements in medicine. These three things combined to allow Europe into Africa. Because remember, initially, they're staying along the coast because they don't want to go in and be exposed to disease that they have never been exposed to. Or they don't want to get involved in these fights with the African tribes. Or it's very difficult to travel into the interior of Africa and get back. And so improvements in movement, weapons, and medicine allow them to do so easier. And so now Europe is looking to move into Africa. And so Europe has they carry out what's called the Berlin Conference. Again, change colors so that you can better see that it's a different thought. The thought changed. Social Darwinism was in blue. Berlin Conference is in green. And so what happens is the Berlin Conference takes place because in South Africa, which is actually a country, in South Africa, it is discovered that they have diamonds and gold. Diamonds and gold. Two things that could make a country very, very wealthy if they properly gather and obtain that's more of what South Africa looks like. But diamonds, gold, if they properly get these things, it can make a country very, very, very rich. And so the European countries start to wonder what other places in Africa have diamonds, what other places have gold. And so they sit and they decide that it's time to have a meeting. They have a giant table. And the Berlin Conference is nothing but a European countries meeting. They all come together. And it's 14 of them. There's 14 countries at this meeting. And they don't want to go to war. Let's divide without war. Their fear is a world war, which is ironic. Because we have two of them later on after this. But their fear is a world war. They want to divide Africa up but without fighting over it. And so one of the things that emerges from this conference, one of the things that happen as a result is, well, how do you claim land in Africa without fighting over it? So how are you able to go and stake your claim? And well, you have to do two things. One, you have to notify the rest of the people that were at the Berlin conference. You got to notify them, and you got to prove that you're in charge. Prove control. Notify them, prove that you are in control. So that's one of the things that come from this. Two things that also come from this. One is, what are the African people going to think about this? So you got the African people here, their thoughts, quite frankly, Europe doesn't care. Europe does not care what the African people think. So much so, proof of this, of the fact that the Europeans don't care about the African people and their thoughts, are that your African leaders, all the people that are, several individuals that are in charge, are never allowed even at the table. They're not even allowed a seat. They are not allowed to come. It's not drawing the way I want it to. Guess that would be my fault because I'm the one drawing, but still. Okay, their trip to the Berlin conference never happens. They do not have a seat at the table. And so they don't ask the African people, they don't ask the African leaders, they decide we're going to divide Africa up. And all you have to do is notify the rest of the group and prove that you're in control. And what you get is a newly divided, that results in an Africa that is divided up the European way. With the exception of, there are two countries that manage to not be that manage to keep from being under European control, and that is Liberia and Ethiopia. Liberia and Ethiopia are the two exceptions. But it is split and divided up the way the Europeans want. You have European divisions. And so Europe divides Africa. And this creates some negative effects. Now we're going to come back over here. I'll start from this side in case you can get something, because there are some positives and some negatives that come from this. So the division of Africa, the splitting and dividing of Africa, leads to some effects. We're going to look at both positive and negative. Because there are both. There are both positive and negative effects. All right? So, negative effect number one. African independence no longer exists, with the exception of, again, Liberia and Ethiopia. But every other country is now under some sort of European control. So the independence that they did have no longer exists. Number two, there's a lot of death that happens, and that death equates to millions. Millions of people die. African people die. For two reasons. One, disease that Europeans brought with them that the Africans were not exposed to, specifically smallpox. Or the second one is in warfare. Fighting back. Millions of people die from either disease or warfare because they fight back against the Europeans. Number three, the culture that existed in Africa, their way of life. After the Europeans go in and divide it up, it divides across these cultural lines. It divides up, not necessarily how the tribes were divided up. All of a sudden these tribes are forced to intermingle because Europe has divided Africa up their way. And so the culture that existed in Africa is broken up. You get a broken culture as an effect. And then the last negative effect is a big one. Then and today is that your gold and your diamonds, the gold and your diamonds are going to Europe. They go to Europe. And that equals money. Which would sound like a good thing, except that money is staying in Europe. That money is never making its way back to the African continent. And so they lose out on natural resources that could have helped them advance, that could have helped them be major players in the world. And this is a major effect still today. Had that money from those gold and those diamonds went to those African countries, one could reasonably ask, are these poor African countries today still poor African countries? We'll never know, because Europeans kind of go into Africa and make it a much worse place. Now, the positives is that you have less local fighting. You have less local tribe versus tribe fighting because now they kind of have a common enemy, and that's the European country that took over. You do have increase in hospitals being built. So hospitals increase. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Literacy. The ability to read and to write. Those go up because more schools are built. So the ability to read and write goes up because more schools are built. And then you have an increase in communication. Phones, telephones, telegrams, telegraphs, things of that nature. All the things that would improve communication, those go up. In the short term, this affects Europe and only Europe. In the long term, it does affect the African continent as a whole. But this is where we're going to stop for today. There are more consequences of the scramble for Africa or European imperialism in Africa. But we'll stop right here. Be sure you check Canvas for your assignment. Reach out to me if you need assistance with that assignment. And as always, have a great day.